Hello, Andrew. Thanks for having you here, and thank you very much that you have the time to participate in our show Wissen macht Klick. I'm very sure that our viewership is eager to hear about your experience and your professional opinion about the matters that we are discussing in the next few minutes. I already introduced you briefly to our audience, but maybe in your own words, just tell our viewership who you are and who you were in your previous life and what you are doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. Kaner, thank you very much for having me. And before we start, I want to say thank you very much also for your excellent command of English. Because without you having that understanding of English, I wouldn't be able to interview with you today. My
Thank you
German
very
is
much.
not good.
Thank you very much. I'm flattered. Thank you.
So, danke, my friend. Thank you very much.
Bitteschön.
My name is Andrew Bustamante. I am a former covert CIA intelligence officer, and I can talk more about what that means as we continue. But in my previous life, I served undercover supporting U.S. national security against some of the biggest threats in the world to the United States and to all of our Western allies like Germany. And now I run my own business called Everyday Spy. You can find me on my homepage at everydayspy.com, or you can find my podcast at the Everyday Espionage podcast. And I dedicate myself now to teach everyday people how to use real-world spy skills to improve their everyday life, whether that's personal security or how they think, how they negotiate and persuade other people to win business or close deals, or even just get their husband to take out the trash, whatever it might be.
Perfect. I think this will be very convenient for our viewers. So let me get this straight. You were a CIA agent, and for a few years, you were really an insider, and you had many insights, and you had many information that is classified to the public. Now, I'm sure you can't, of course, tell us classified information here, but I hope that you can put a light on these questions our viewers sent us to you for this show. And maybe for the beginning, because our viewers, they know the names from the American movies. Maybe you can shed a light on the difference, what CIA is doing, what the FBI is doing. And since 10 years, we Germans also know the NSA. And maybe you can shed a light on these three agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. It is easy to get confused because the movies do so much wrong when they explain the different agencies. So in a nutshell, FBI is our government police force. They enforce the law and they keep Americans safe inside the United States. If something is happening outside of the United States, the FBI is not involved usually. So that's the easiest way to understand the FBI. They're the national police, and they protect us inside our own country. The NSA is an intelligence division that collects something called signals intelligence. Signals intelligence is information that's sent over digital waves, whether that's on the internet or over radio or intercepting satellites. That's what NSA does. They're called National Security Agency, NSA, but their specific job has to do with collecting those signals, invisible signals of all different varieties that have to do with secrets and threats to the United States from overseas. They also collect sometimes inside the country because, just like Germany, we are a free country. So we have terrorists and we have criminals and we have intelligence operatives inside our country, and NSA is always trying to collect from them. And then you have CIA, and CIA is primarily the Secret Intelligence Service of the United States that collects foreign intelligence. So we do not work inside the United States. FBI works inside the United States. CIA's job is to collect intelligence from all around the world, whether that's friendly countries or hostile countries, and we're trying to collect secrets that are secrets about threats to the United States or the American people. So we're not interested in collecting secrets about what prime ministers eat for dinner or what their favorite thing is to drink, or if they're having an affair. Those things don't matter to CIA. What matters to CIA is if someone is planning some kind of hostile attack or posing some kind of economic threat to the United States or the American people.
Okay, thanks for making that clear, Andrew. And let's cut to the chase, to the questions that our viewers sent us for you. And of course, the reason for our interview, the primary reason, is the Russian-Ukraine conflict. And yeah, on the 24th February, many of us woke up in a new world. And we saw in the news that Kiev is being attacked by Russia. And maybe I don't know how you Americans feel about this, but we Germans feel a bit threatened, because I think that many Germans at that morning had a look at the world map, and they saw that the Ukraine is pretty near to us, and this is we have a new sense of threat that is happening here. Because, of course, there was Syria, there was Afghanistan, but now we are feeling, especially with Germans, we are feeling that that war is right in front of our door. And this show is not so much about the political reasons for this. There are many news shows that cover this, but at Computer Wissen and Wissen Nacht Click, we are covering more the technical stuff, and therefore the next questions are primarily discussing about the technical warfare that Russia or any other country is able to do. Yeah, long story short, the first question to you, Andrew, is Russia able to hack and disable infrastructure in Germany?
It's a great question, Kainer, and I would say that the sense that you're describing about how the Germans feel about war being so close, that is a healthy sense. That is a correct, healthy, accurate way to feel. I would disagree that the world has changed, because Russia has always been waiting to take this kind of action. We saw them do it in 2014 when they took Crimea. We saw them do it in 2008 when they invaded Georgia. They're very focused on their former Soviet states, but nevertheless, all NATO countries, and especially European countries that are national European leaders like Germany, are countries that are very much in a position of threat. So Russia absolutely has the ability to shut down infrastructure. They can shut down power plants. They can shut down railroads. They can shut down air traffic control. They can cut off power via its electricity or whether it's gas. They can upset hydroelectric plants. They can cause server outages that will disrupt internet. They can turn off satellites that will disrupt cellular phones. They can also have a different kind of attack. There's multiple types of attacks in the cyber world. There's disruption, and then there's denial. A denial attack is when they just turn something off. So one day you're driving down the street, and then all of the power grid gets turned off. Nobody has electricity, and the stoplights all go black, and there is no electricity in the city, or in Berlin, or in Munich, or you name where. That's a denial attack. There's also what's known as disruption attacks. Disruption attacks are when they go in and they intentionally either erase or change or create a virus that causes a hiccup in an existing system. It's not that different from when you get sick. You might get a nose sniffle, you might get a cold, but that cold changes the way your whole body reacts. So in a disruption operation, they'll disrupt one small piece of code that causes chaos in the entire system. And that's another kind of attack that they might use. But they have the capacity to do it in the United States. They have already done it in Ukraine. They've cut power to 230,000 people in one button click. They absolutely have the potential to do it against any NATO ally, including Germany.
a second question to this. I expect to have the United States or Germany to have some kind of protection, right? It isn't as easy as the Russians pressing one button and then a power plant will be offline. There must be some kind of protection, and maybe the next question is in this regard. Now we know the Russians are very capable, and probably the Chinese are very capable, and also the United States and Germany is capable. How would you rank them if you would make a world ranking in your head right now? Which nation technically is in the first place, and maybe the top three of the countries that are technically skilled?
Absolutely. So Russia is the number one country. They are the most skilled, and that's for a few different reasons. They have hackers that are extremely professional, and they can do things without you ever knowing they were there. They can be very, very clean. The Chinese are not like that. The Chinese and the North Koreans are very sloppy. So when they go in and they mess up with a computer system, it's very easy for forensics or computer scientists to go in and find who made that change, who caused that disruption or that denial. With Russia, it's very difficult. They can see that someone made a change, but they don't know who it was. So Russia, for sure, is the number one threat in all things technological in the world. Israel is the number two. Extremely, extremely good at what they do. And luckily, they're an ally to the West, so we worry less about Israel. Number three would be France. France is also extremely capable in cyber warfare and in cyber defense and cyber intelligence. And they're someone that not many people know about because they are so good at what they do, they don't talk about it. After those three, then you start coming into countries like the United States, like Germany, like India, or sometimes Iran. There's Turkey, more capable countries, but not in the top three. Those top three are Russia, Israel, and France.
Wow, I feel kind of offended that France is ahead of Germany. I really didn't expect that, but great for having you here. I wouldn't have known that, honestly. And yeah, our next question will be, now imagine me as a private man, me as a private user. What dangers do I face as a private user from foreign cyber attacks in general, or from Russia in particular? What can happen to me personally?
So the thing to keep in mind is that when Russia creates any kind of cyber activity, they're usually targeting national level objectives. They're looking to disrupt major corporations or government organizations. They're not interested in the individual user. However, the way that Russia is set up, it's a very poor country, and there's a great deal of corruption. What that means is they don't have a professional cyber hacking force. Germany has a professional force. The United States has a professional force, trained people who are supposed to just do one job, and that is supposed to be cyber defense or cyber offense, cyber warriors. In Russia, they have a large network of cyber criminals, very successful criminals that will get a phone call or an invitation to work part-time as an offensive cyber agent for the government, and they'll get paid for it. So for a criminal, it's a good reason to be a good criminal, because then you'll also get work from the government. The individual criminals are the ones you have to worry about as individuals, because they're always looking to find new ways to break into banks, break into medical centers, break into places that hold personal information, and that personal information could be yours. And the reason they do that is because they want access to your credit card. They want access to your national ID. They want access to your laptop, to your telephone, to your contacts list, to your social media, because with that information, they can make more money. They can sell your credit card on the black market. They can turn on your phone and collect pictures and collect audio and then come back and use it as blackmail to get money out of you. They can hijack your laptop and steal your files and then hold your files ransom and force you to buy your own files back from them. So I would not say you have to worry about the Russian government, but the capability and the talent that they have is largely owed to their large network of cyber criminals, and those criminals are people you have to worry about.
Yeah, maybe if I can add something to this, because we also covered that in a show about 2 years ago. I had a show about ransomware. And in Germany, it happened to a hospital that they were infected by ransomware, and all their patient files got encrypted. And the doctors in the hospital didn't know anymore what's going on with the patients, with the clients. And it actually happened that one woman had a car accident, and they were the hospital that was hacked. That was the next hospital, and the hospital said, no, we can't take her in because we don't have access to her files. We can't to do anything, and they had to drive her to the next hospital, but she didn't make it.
That's unfortunate.
And that was the first case where a ransomware attack resulted in actual death. That was the first case about 2 years ago. So, of course,
do you remember the country that was?
It wasn't Germany. It wasn't Germany.
No, but was it a German hacker who held ransom the hospital, or was it a different country?
No, the hospital was attacked randomly. Like one employee just opened a wrong email, and the whole hospital got infected. So it was a freaky accident with the hospital, and it was also a really unfortunate accident with a woman who just happened to have a car accident at that time. And all these pieces came together, and these resulted in the death of a woman because of ransomware. That was the first bad example what can happen if a hospital is attacked in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a very real risk. So I'm sad that happened, but that is a perfect example of what Russia is capable of if they choose to. And you can imagine the chaos that would ensue if they were to attack, let's just say, 5 major hospitals in 5 major cities across Germany at one time. And would that make Germany change their position in the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's unsettling to hear, but it's the truth, I guess.
Correct.
So, to the next question. To what extent does Russia influence or does want to influence German citizens via social media? And I reckon they are not only active in Germany, but in the USA as well.
Exactly right. Yeah, Russia actually has a very advanced, what's known as covert influence. They have a very advanced covert influence platform where they are able to use social media, and not just social media, but all forms of media: television media, radio media, digital media, written media like books and magazines, pamphlets and flyers, even advertisements. Now, all of these go into a full, comprehensive strategy for covert influence or secret influence. And one of their top 5 targets would be Germany, in large part because German demand for Russian resources, Russian oil, is one of the top demands in the world. And because of that, they need to make sure that they have a favorable rating among German people. So they want politicians who are pro-Russia. They want Germans who are favorably thoughtful about Russia. They want companies to want to do business in Russia. They want German investors to invest in Russia. And all of those reasons make for examples of why they would be interested in influencing the German people. What those influence campaigns look like: anytime you read a newspaper article in a newspaper that is positive about Russia, there's a good chance that there's either a lobbyist or there's some sort of activity going on to influence the newspaper to want to write a positive story. The same thing with your politicians. If you have politicians who are running for office and they run on a platform that is pro-Russian, then there's a good opportunity there to see that there's most likely some sort of campaign going on in Russia to influence that politician to favorably be disposed to Russia. It's just the way the world works, and it's always been that way. You're going to see more activity on election years when new presidents or new prime ministers or new governors are being elected. You're going to see less activity when other countries are having elections. So this year, the United States has elections in 2022. You'll see a large increase in attacks in the United States, but perhaps not in some of our other countries. France, I think, is going through an election cycle this year as well, and I would expect that they would see quite a bit of activity from Russian covert influence.
Okay. And yeah, the next question would be, I don't know if you can disclose anything about that, but I will just ask you straight ahead. Does American intelligence know exactly what next step Putin and the Kremlin and Russia are planning?
I can confidently say that they do not know the exact next step, because I don't think anyone knows the exact next step except perhaps Putin himself. And the way that intelligence works in the real world is that intelligence is about collecting information that allows you to make a decision on probability. What is the most likely thing that will happen? What is the second most likely thing? What is the third most likely thing? And those types of estimates, those types of guesses, informed hypotheses, are being created all the time by CIA, by BND, by DGSE in France, by all of our NATO allies. Everyone is working to collect information and create these estimates, these hypotheses of what might happen next. I don't think anyone anticipated, for example, that Ukraine resistance would be so strong. I believe that multiple intelligence services, including the United States and including Russia, assumed that the resistance would be very weak and it would falter. We were all wrong. So that was a hypothesis that was wrong. Now we find ourselves going into week number 5 of a war where no one has helped Ukraine, but the resistance continues to stymie, continues to frustrate the Russian military. So yeah, I would, to answer your question short, nobody knows exactly what will happen next, but there are multiple estimates, and I think the most popular estimate at this point in time is that this will turn into a long, vicious, destructive, prolonged fight. I think at this point, if you remember the Chechen wars in the early 2000s and late 90s, that's the strategy that Putin has taken at this point in time. And now I think he wants to send a message to everyone that Russia is not weak and Russia will destroy anything that stands in its way. That's why he's not going to go to the negotiation table. No matter how many times Zelensky says, let's negotiate, let's negotiate. Putin's just going to keep destroying and keep killing so that when Zelensky does come to the table, he has no other option except to concede.
Okay. Well, we have to have more happy findings here in that interview, maybe in the next few questions. Yeah, but as I said, you were in the CIA. I think the world is the way it is, and maybe many of us feel like we were in a time of peace, and this had changed a little bit. Now you're saying that many steps could be anticipated beforehand, but that's how we feel actually. That 1 month ago the world was a better place, and now it changed to a little different place. And maybe let's take a question ahead of this. I had to put this in for later, but the Russian-Ukraine war is affecting us in terms of prices now. I don't know how it's in America. I just saw in America that you also are dealing with higher gas prices at the gas stations. We Germans too. We Germans love our cars, and we don't love high gas prices nor high prices for heating. And I don't know if you heard, but we don't have sunflower oil in the markets available. That's one commodity that is now really rare. And the people are beginning again to buy up toilet paper and many different things. I don't understand it, but that's the way it is. And the question is straightforward. Why does the war make everything more expensive?
The war always drives economy. That's one of the strange benefits of war. War makes people buy. War makes businesses produce more. War makes the government spend more money on business because everything is needed to ramp up to prepare for the worst if the worst happens. So that's part of what's happening. It's based on economics. It's based on supply and demand. If there's a large supply of toilet paper and demand is low, then toilet paper will be very inexpensive. But as soon as people start buying all of the toilet paper, then the supply is low, demand is high, and that allows the stores to increase the price of toilet paper. The toilet paper manufacturer themselves, they're not going to just create more toilet paper. There's no benefit for them to start running their machines for more or longer because they might accidentally create a surplus that the stores won't buy because these events are so unpredictable. The war might be over next week or it might not be over for 3 more months. Right now, if the toilet paper company keeps making the same amount of toilet paper, they know they will get top dollar for every roll. The same thing is true for oil. The same thing is true for natural gas. It's true for sunflower oil. It's true for produce and everything else. The thing that is also tricky, specifically in Germany, is that you have a harsh winter. And this war has broken out in the spring. Depending on how NATO chooses to handle Russia, Russia could very well choose to use the winter as a chance to punish NATO by intentionally driving up the prices for oil, for heating elements. And you already know that if NATO puts sanctions on Russia that make it so that Europe will no longer buy Russian material at all, if that happens, you'll already have a higher price because now you have to go to a secondary or tertiary provider, and that is expensive. So I want to have good news for you, Kaner. The best news that I can tell you is that you and I are having this conversation, so the people who listen to your show will not be surprised as this continues to unfold. Unfortunately, this is a predictable pattern of conflict, which is why the whole world is watching to see what will Germany do to lead NATO in a response. Because, frankly, the United States is not at risk in this conflict. That's why I don't understand why we are talking so much about President Biden. He's not a threat. We as the American people, we pay an extra $1 for our gas, but that's all. All of our food comes from somewhere else. Most of our country doesn't have harsh winter. We're not in the same position as Germany. We're not in the same position as France and Lithuania and all of Romania. You guys have you're much more exposed to the threat of this conflict than anyone else. And unfortunately, that means NATO will have to decide what they do.
Hey, don't talk like that Russia doesn't affect you, because Sarah Palin said it was 12 years ago that she could see Russia from her window.
That's true. So, she did say that. And she went on to not be the vice president.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Maybe I can put the next 2 questions together there because they are very similar. The first question is, a user sent it, a viewer sent it to us. I get internet and phone via satellite. Shortly after the war started, I could barely access internet sites. I got error messages everywhere, timeouts, page not found, and so on. And also, there was an article in the newspaper that referred to hacker attacks in Ukraine, which attacked gateways. Could you explain in layman terms how is this possible, or what Russia did? Or is this just a coincidence that there is an error in internet via satellite? What was going on?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact scenario, the exact situation for the satellite users in Germany, but here's the two questions are related and different at the same time. So when you hear people talk about an attack, the attacks in Ukraine, the term gateway is not one that I've heard before, but generally speaking, the strategy for a cyber attack is to attack a vulnerable spot, to attack one place that will have multiple rounds of impact. Kind of like attacking a house, you would have to go through the gate first. So if you wanted to shut down power to 230,000 Ukrainians, then you would target the one power plant that provides power to those 230,000 people. It's easier to do that than to attack each individual house or each individual district or municipality. So that is the kind of gateway that I think people are talking about. You attack the power plant as the gateway to the people. You would attack a satellite as the gateway to all of those satellite users. You would attack the water treatment plant as a way to affect the water for everyone in the city who drinks the water. That is the type of gateway attack that I think people are referencing when they talk about gateway. Now, in the satellite world, there's a couple things that are interesting. First, a cyber attack against satellites is absolutely possible. However, it's difficult unless you attack the gateway, the node that controls multiple satellites. It's not efficient to attack satellite by satellite, and the uplinks are generally very secure, so it can be time consuming to attack a satellite. Instead, what you probably saw happen when those satellite internet went down was that satellites carry multiple payloads. They have multiple services on a single satellite. And the people who control those satellites have the option to do something called prioritize. They can prioritize which payload, which service gets the most power, which payload gets the least amount of power. So what very well could have happened is that in those early days, the government reached out to the satellite providers and tasked the satellites and paid them to prioritize government messages, maybe images, perhaps encrypted channels of communication around the world. But the satellite companies knew that they would turn off service to individual customers for a short period of time in order to prioritize national security needs for the German government. That's a very common practice in the United States as well, and it's a very common practice throughout Europe and in the West, because every satellite in space generally carries commercial and government payloads, whether it's experimental, whether it's science-based, whether it's communication-based or national security-based. They almost all carry some kind of purpose, mission that is government-related.
Okay. And yeah, we are coming to the last question of that interview. And this question warms my heart because many of my viewers know here that I'm also the chief editor of the Linux Insider and that Linux is my special field. What is your opinion on that question? One viewer asked, is Windows more at risk than Linux? And maybe we can put this on two different fields. Like, is it more secure for the government to use Linux instead of Windows? And the other field would be, is it more secure for me to use Linux than Windows? Now, my opinion on that matter is biased, but maybe you can share your professional opinion on that.
Absolutely. So, and I appreciate everybody who uses Linux, because it's not an easy platform to get talented with. However, this question really boils down to a question of practicality rather than security. Windows has more than 75% of the world market share. The government, the US government, and almost every Western government uses Windows to control all government computers, government servers, government platforms. Your most successful businesses in the world all ride on the back of Windows. For that reason, it makes financial sense for every cyber criminal, every government organization to target Windows first. Because if they can hack into Windows, they can hack into governments, businesses, hospitals, you name it. So that's why they put so much time and so much effort into being able to penetrate Windows. On top of that, you have the double-edged sword. You have the problem that Windows, Microsoft, is a company. So they have to create products quickly, and they have to sell their products quickly. They can't take 10 years to make a perfect product. They have to be able to put something out every 2 years or so. So that means that they're moving so fast that they create software that has problems with it. And only their engineers know those problems, not the users, not the government, not the hospitals. That makes it so that cyber criminals already know that the newest upgrade or the newest operating system for Windows will have a weakness. They just have to find the weakness and use the weakness. Linux, on the other hand, is open source. It's public code. It has every Linux user has the ability to look into Linux and see where its problems are and what's accurate and what's not accurate. Each individual user can even go into their own system and scrub their own code to understand what's happening. They can control every element of their computer, which makes it so that nothing happens on your computer that you as a Linux user don't understand or know about. Now that's changing because as Linux wants more of the market share, they try to find more ways to make it convenient. And the convenience is what brings the insecurity. For example, your .exe files, your executable files. Windows will automatically run an executable. Linux used to be that it would not. You'd have to tell it to run a specific executable. They're moving towards being able to auto-trigger executables so that if you run a Linux operating system and double-click on a button, it will automatically run, period. So those are the big differences. 75+% of the world uses Microsoft, 2% of the world uses Linux. It just makes more sense for bad guys to go after Microsoft first. Now that said, if you are talented and if you are very particular about wanting to control your computer, Linux is the way to go. It's worth learning how to use it. It's worth investing your time and effort. Kaner, if you're a leader in that world, you're a fantastic teacher. That's the place to go. But if you're just a common, average user who uses your computer for personal things and for internet browsing, nothing too intense, Microsoft is totally okay. The iOS operating system, I use a Chrome operating system. I use a Google Chromebook. All of those operating systems are perfectly fine for running everyday needs because the average person is not going to be a target of a national threat or a cyber criminal with intense desire. It's just going to be, a random attack that would attack any computer system anywhere. But if you are running Microsoft, you are more likely to be at risk because more people have Microsoft.
Oh man, Andrew, I really have to put my teeth together to not say anything here because you opened a full can of worms here right now. There is one thing I don't agree with you, and that's that you said that Linux is not for the average guy. Shameless advertisement at that point. I teach regular average computer guys or computer users to put the fear aside of using Windows and get a hang of Linux and particular Ubuntu Linux. And it is not as terrible or as complicated as many people would think because I also provide them with documentation, video tutorials, and so on. And I think if you put some 3-4 hours into that documentation, then you can get an idea on how to use Linux, how to test Linux, and if you want, how to install Linux. But really, this would be another topic for another show, I guess, for Windows versus Linux.
Well, I also think, Kaner, that it's because it's you. I would trust you to teach the average person Linux, but I would not trust the average Linux user to teach the average person Linux.
That's right. That's very right. I think we can agree on that. Andrew, yeah, that were the questions for today. I was very glad that you found the time to participate in our show Wissen macht Klick. Thank you very much for your professional opinion on that matter. I think that was very interesting for our users, for our viewership. And yeah, thank you again. I hope to see you one another time in our show. You're a welcome guest. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Keener.